Hello everyone, I'm Ain,
I'm Emily.
I'm Steven.
and today you will be talking about natural resources.
Journal for today. Today you will learn all about the following. What are natural resources? Amortization for natural resources. What are future removal or site restoration costs? How is the amortization calculator for natural resources? Trend of amortization expense. An example. And finally, equipment used when extracting natural resources. What are natural resources? Natural resources are long-lived productive assets that involve mineral deposits, oil and gas reserves, thermal energy sources, and standing timber. Natural resources are tangible capital assets that are obtained and used for the economy's gain. The two distinguishing characteristics for natural resources are 1. They are physically extracted in operations, so this would include mining, cutting, or pumping, and 2. They are replaceable only by an act of nature. As a result of these characteristics, natural resources are often referred to as wasting assets. As a general rule, natural resources are primarily recorded at their direct cost of acquisition. Acquisition cost of a natural resource is the cash or cash equivalent price of acquiring the resource and preparing it for its intended use. When dealing with a resource that's already been discovered, such as an existing coal mine, cost is the price paid for the property. Additional amounts such as legal fees, surveying costs, and exploration and development costs are also applicable.
Okay. Once the cost basis is determined, it needs to be allocated over the periods benefited through a method called depletion. The depletion of natural resources is a similar concept to depreciating property, plant, and equipment. The only difference is that along with considering residual value, any future removal or site restoration costs also have to be taken into account.
For natural resources, important issues such as site restoration, reforestation, and environmental cleanup needs to be addressed. Companies are required to protect the natural resource, particularly when it's used up all by the environmental legislation. Restoration and removal costs are regularly needed to return the natural resource to its natural state at the end of its use, or as close as possible. So the match principle indicates that restoration and removal costs should be estimated in advance and allocated over the useful life of the natural resource. They are not to be recorded in the year of closure or of the resource.
An additional point to note is that natural resources don't wear out over time, but they lose value when the resource is being extracted. This is why we use depletion rather than depreciation for natural resources. To calculate the amortization of wasting assets, we commonly use the units of activity method. This method is used since natural resource amortization is usually a function of units extracted throughout the year. Under this method, the total cost of the natural resource is subtracted by the residual value. It is also added to any restoration costs, which are then divided by the number of units estimated to be in the resource. The outcome is an amortizable cost per unit of product. Finally, the number of units extracted and sold in order to determine the annual amortization multiplies the amortizable cost per unit.
These formulas are used to calculate accumulated amortization and liability for restoration, which are used when journalizing as well as using it on the balance sheet. Liability for restoration plus accumulated amortization equals amortization expense. This is just another way of calculating amortization expense.
Trend of amortization expense. By using the units of activity method, it produces an unstable condition from year to year for amortization expense due to various factors. Some examples of factors would be how it's difficult to estimate the total units used and sold since they vary yearly.
So keep in mind that the depletion expense is equal to depletion per unit multiplied by the number of units extracted and sold, but only if all resources extracted are sold during the period. However, if some of the ore does not sell, the portion of the amortization expense would be under a current asset. When journalizing, the account would be called unsold ore inventory and it would go on the balance sheet.
Created using Powtoon.